the day that turned my life around. Shortly after I turned 25, I met a man by the name of Earthchef. Little did I know how this encounter would change my life. Up until then, my life had been embarrassingly typical of the vast majority of people who lead great lives of little achievement and even less happiness. I did have a wonderful start, growing up in the loving environment of a small farming community in southwestern Idaho, just a short walk from the shores of the Snake River. When I left home, I was filled with a hope of carving for myself a good side chunk of the American dream. However, things did not turn out quite as I expected. After graduating from high school, I promptly went to college. But at the end of 1 year, I decided I was smart enough, so I quit. This turned out to be a major mistake. One of many major mistakes I was made during those early days. But I was impatient to work and to earn, figuring I wouldn't have any trouble getting a job. Which turned out to the accurate. Getting a job wasn't hard. I was yet to understand the difference between merely making a living and making a life. Shortly afterward, I got married, and like the typical husband, I made my wife large up promise about the wonderful future which I knew was just around the corner. After all, I was ambitious. I was very sincere about my desire to succeed, and I did work hard. Success and assured was assured, or so I thought. When I turned 25, I had been working for 6 years, so I decided to take stock of my progress. I had a nagging suspicions that things wasn't going quite right. My quickly paycheck amounted to the grand total of $57. I was far behind in my promise, and even further behind with the growing fire of bills thrown across our rickety kitchen table. By now I was a father saddled with ever-growing responsibilities for my expanding family, but most of all I realized that gradually I had settled into quietly accepting my mutual lot. In a moment of honesty, I began to see that rather than making progress, I was falling further behind financially with each passing day. Something clearly had to change, but what? Maybe hard work alone doesn't do it. I thought to myself. This, for me, were the shocking realizations, right as I was to believe that reward comes to those who earn their living by the sweep of their brow. But it was plain as day that although I was waiting plenty, I was on my way to ending up at a city like so many people I saw around me, broke and in need of assistance. They terrify me. I couldn't face that kind of future. Not in this, the richest country in the world. Still, I had more questions than answers. What should I do? How could I change the direction of my life? I thought about going back to school. Only 1 year of college. It doesn't look good on a job application, but with a family to look after, going back to school seemed impractical. Then I thought about starting a business. Now that was an exciting option, but of course, I didn't have the needed capital. After all, money was one of my biggest problems. I always had far too much money left over at the end of the month. Have you ever been in that position? One day, I lost $10. It upset me so much that I feel physically ill for 2 weeks over a $10 bill. One of my friends tried to cheer me up. "Look, Jim," he said. "Maybe some poor soul who needed it found it." But believe me, that did not cheer me up. As far as I was concerned, I was the person who needed to find $10, not lose it. I must admit that at that time in my life, benevolence had not yet seized me. So that's where I was at age 25, behind on my dreams without a clue as to how to change my life for the better. Then one day, good fortune came my way. Why did it appear at this point in my life? Why did good things happen when they do? I really don't know. For me, this is part of my mystery of life. Anyway, my good fortune came when I met a man, a very special person by the name of Rohn. I first saw him at a sales conference where he was conducting a seminar. I cannot tell you what he said that evening that captivated me so, but I can still remember thinking to myself that I would give anything to be like him. At the end of the seminar, it took all the courage I could muster to just walk up to him and introduce myself. But in spite of my fumbling, he must have seen my desire to succeed. He was kind and generous and eventually took a liking to me. A few months later, he hired me to join his sales organization. For the next 5 years, I learned many of life lessons from Mr. Soft. He treated me like a son, spending hours teaching me his personal philosophy, which I now call the 7 strategies for wealth and happiness. Then one day, at age 49, and without anyone, Mr. died. After mourning the loss of my mentor, I took some time to assess the impact he had on my life. I realized that the best thing I received from him was not a job or even the opportunity to grow from the sales trainees to its executive vice president of his company. Rather, it was what I learned from the wisdom of his philosophy of life and his fundamentals for successful living. How to be wealthy, how to be happy. During the next few years, I incorporated his ideas into my life, and I prospered. In fact, I made a great deal of money, but the most gratifying experience was sharing those ideas with my business associates and employees. The response was enthusiastic, and the results immediate and measurable. Although I saw myself primarily a businessman and not as an author or speaker, I feel brought to the challenge of communicating to others simply and directly. Those ideas make a difference in how a person's life turns out.